and you can always edit this out. Do you want to come up, Poe? Is that what you're doing?
Do you wish to join us, Poe? We're now live.
Live. How are we doing, guys? Welcome to Be Strong Podcast, episode 5, the conspiracy episode. So I'm Costor, this is my co-host.
Hello, Tom Walker.
So, as you can tell, usually we try to make our podcast generally filled with some useful content that you can take away with yourself. We cover listener questions, but at the heart of it, Tom and I are occasionally silly geese, and today we decided that we're going to go over some conspiracy theories, 2 in particular. We're broadcasting this live, so if you notice we're looking across, just saying hi to people that are joining us live. And seeing as we're doing a conspiracy episode, we are fully kitted out, so for those of you watching on YouTube, you'll see. For those of you not, you're missing out. How are we doing, everyone joining us live?
Hello.
So, what we've decided to talk about today is 2 of the more enduring conspiracies, our takes on them. So we're going to look at JFK and we're going to look at 9/11. Now, obviously, it was hard to narrow it down to those 2, but those 2 were voted for when we put this out quite a lot. It came up quite a lot, and there's quite a lot of. I think there's a lot of meat to the bones of these
There
ones.
is. I've got sucked into JFK more than I thought I would have.
Yeah. So obviously, we wanted to do our research on this. My mum's joined as well. How you doing, Taylor? How you doing?
All right, Mum.
So, I figured what we do is basically start with JFK, because I think that was almost like conspiracy 1, wasn't it? That was like the original.
Yeah.
Now everything's a conspiracy, and I do feel like people
It's basic. They don't give it the level of
depth,
depth that we've given this.
And it feels like they're not even trying anymore with their conspiracies. They don't like JFK. There's a lot that you can kind of unravel in there. It feels like a real good conspiracy. Nowadays ones are a bit shit. Like there's not very good conspiracies compared to this. But that seems to have been ground zero that spawned like a whole counterculture of everything being a conspiracy.
Yeah.
So the original, as far as I'm aware, the prevailing story when it comes to JFK is that there was one lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, who fired 3 shots, although there's been debate on how many shots, between 2 and 4 have been reported, and we're going to kind of go into that as well. But the official story is Lee Harvey Oswald fired 3 shots, all from behind, and killed President Kennedy. Before he could stand trial, he was himself assassinated. So we never really got to the bottom of the why of it. That's the official standpoint, and as far as I'm aware, it has remained. We have our conspiracy doggo Poe trying to join the podcast.
Do you want to join us, Poe?
Come on, Poe.
We need to make you a tinfoil hat, buddy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So here's our conspiracy doggo.
Do you want a hat? No.
He'll probably be here chuntering away for the podcast. So, Tom, first off, before we go into what we think happened and everything like that, from looking at the footage, which I believe wasn't available at the time. I think this has come out post.
No, because it's still in that stage where they weren't allowed to release it, and then they started to release it. Yeah.
So now we have hindsight going with us that we can actually look at the footage. When you watch that footage, pretty grim. I've watched it multiple times. I don't think I've ever watched someone be assassinated.
I thought about that.
Yeah.
I've been listening to stuff on my way to work, and then I had because I can't play YouTube when I'm driving my car, I'll just have it at the bottom, and then I glanced down my phone and just saw this head get blasted. I was like, I've not seen a real person get shot in the head
get
before.
Shot like that, and I've watched it multiple times. It's pretty dark. When you watch that, what's your initial thoughts in terms of how his body reacts? Now, right off the bat, I think it's worth saying that neither myself or Tom are ballistic experts.
Speak for yourself.
I suppose now we probably are watching that.
Yeah.
But I have no experience with how a body reacts when it's been shot.
Yeah.
I can only go with what my initial gut instinct would say. But when you watch that, what is your instinctive reaction?
So I thought the first shot, because there's 2 shots initially, we can discuss that. But from what I saw in the first one, it looks like he gets shot once, and it looks like he gets shot from the front. And then the second shot, which is the shot to the head, it looks like it's come from the front. But then there's a bit of a weird head wobble, so I can see why there's a discussion around that. But from what I can understand, the initial report was saying that one of the first shot came from behind. Was that correct? Can't remember.
Yeah, so it's unclear. The very first shot is the supposed magic bullet. So again, for those of you joining now, you're going to see me and Tom look across because we're actually filming for YouTube over here and filming for Instagram over here. The initial first shot supposedly went through the back of his shoulder, out through his throat. So it came from behind.
Hang on, I'll change my view. Now I've said it. Yeah, because the first shot, he comes forwards a little bit, doesn't it? It looks like he catches himself.
You see him and they can't really see, you can see the confusion, and that bullet apparently went through him.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Hit multiple bones on the way through him, and then embedded itself in the gentleman to the front left, in the front.
Governor.
Ended up in his leg. So that bullet supposedly passed through a lot of human matter, effectively. And in the confusion there, the car progresses for a few seconds until it reaches the grassy knoll, which was on the front right, which is, in my opinion, I agree with you, it looks very much like when you see the video that he reacts like this, as if he's been shot here. His head comes back, his arm comes up, looks like a very powerful rifle, obviously, to have that kind of impact on him. And like numerous brain particles and everything come out the back, which kind of, in my opinion, again, not an expert, but I would assume that's fairly consistent with being shot from the front.
Yeah, I've played enough computer games to know where a sniper is.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But yeah, I think it's safe to say when you watch the video, like, you could argue the first shot, you don't necessarily know where it comes from. Because you see him come forward, don't you? Yeah. But then the second shot, I can't imagine if he's been shot from behind or that backside where they said the first shot came from, they'd have gone up and to the left hand side, and your arm shot up to that side.
Yeah.
You'd imagine some sort of forward motion.
Yeah. The official, and again, you could get an expert that would say this and convince me either way, because I don't really know. But the official statement is that his reaction back and to the right was a convulsion, and I imagine if you get traumatic brain injury, your body is going to react in unusual ways. You could spasm.
Well, I'll add to that. I don't think it would do a convulsion like that. You will know, like, if you've probably seen it right in MMA. Oh, frozen.
Yeah.
That's the neurological response if you have that impact. But I'm like, I think to say it's a convulsion is incorrect, because what you're also dealing with is a projectile that's travelling at hundreds of miles an hour and hitting you. I think that'll cause more of a movement than...
that is true. I'm going to move this backwards a little bit just so you guys aren't missing out on our glorious hats, and make sure that doesn't fall over.
Up there we go. That's better.
There we go. Now cool. You guys can see us properly. So the official line hasn't changed. Is that Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone gunman, fired 3 shots, and all these 3 shots, the 3 confirmed shots. There is argument there's more or less, but he fired those pretty rapidly. It was in under 6 seconds.
5.6 to be precise.
Exactly, with a bolt action rifle, which you have to be pretty rapid to fire, recock. Or I think it was like you have to
put the bullet in as well, don't you?
Yeah, I think it's like one of those old school rifles. You turn, you cock, and you hear, and it basically feeds the next bullet in. Okay. To do that quickly, you'd have to be an exceptional shot. Now he was apparently he just qualified as a sharpshooter.
Yeah, in the Marines.
Yeah. Which is good. You have to be a good shot, but he wasn't an exceptional shot. That's the thing. He was good, but there were a lot of people that could make those shots in arguably less time. Yeah. So it's possible. However, having gone down the rabbit hole and watched a lot of blood splatter analysis and testimony from people around there, there's a lot of suggestion that there was a shooter on the grassy knoll. So a lot of people reported that they thought the shot had come from the grassy knoll, which was in front and to the right.
And just to be clear, we were told that Lee Harvey Oswald was behind to the right hand side. That's correct.
He was up in the suppository building. I can't remember the depository building.
Yeah.
He was supposedly
second floor depository building. Yeah.
Which is consistent with the bullet that had gone through the back, but not necessarily consistent with the kill shot. Now, there's also an argument that after he got hit from the front, he also got hit from the back. 2 almost simultaneous shots. In my opinion, and again, my opinion being just what I can see with my own eyes and various bits that I'm led to believe by watching things, I would say that it is like there is definitely at least reasonable doubt that there was another shooter in there that has not been apprehended. So if Lee Harvey Oswald was in fact shooter number one, and he denied that up until he was shot, he said he was a patsy, but if he was the shooter and he was in that building at the time with that rifle from behind, I think it's fairly likely that there was also someone in the front, potentially on the grassy knoll, firing another shot.
So this is the thing with conspiracy theories. What people do is they get too carried away and then be like, well, because they had a shoot at the front, it was a troll, and that troll had 2 arms, which are like 4 arms that would allow it to reload. There's a lot of a slippery slope fallacy.
Yeah.
But I think from extrapolating the information they have, I would confidently say that there was 2 shooters.
Yeah.
Whether or not it was Lee Harvey Oswald as the first and someone else as the second, I don't know. But definitely more than 1 shooter.
Now, there was testimony from someone around the area that had said, at the time of the shooting at the grassy knoll, there was someone from Secret Service there who showed a badge. So the policeman went there. This person showed a badge that confirmed they were Secret Service. But the policeman remembers that this person that showed the badge had dirty fingernails, like a mechanic, something that was unusual.
Right, okay.
And then this person just vanished.
Right.
Secret Service confirmed that they had no personnel on site at all at the time. So there's a suspicion that this person was at the grassy knoll, supposedly caught in frame on one camera, although you can't really tell.
Oh, I've seen that clip. Yep. Yeah.
It's like you see a blur. It looks like it could be a person's head.
Thanks, Dan. The tinfoils, very, very strong look.
I was pretty impressed with our efforts on these, to be fair.
And what you didn't see, Dan, is I put my head on the table and tried to roll my head around it, but it worked first time. So.
Yeah, it's a fly look. Now, what they said was that this guy was at the grassy knoll, fired the shot, put his rifle in the car boot and closed it, and then for all intents and purposes, he then is a bystander that with a government ID and was able to walk off.
Right.
The car park was closed, obviously, but the cars were never searched. So eventually, when it reopened, all the cars left. So either this person was the shooter and ditched the rifle in the car, or teams. So, in sniper teams, you often get a spotter and a shooter.
Yeah.
This person was the spotter, and the shooter and the rifle went into the boot.
Yeah.
And the person came back later on and claimed the car and vanished into the ether. I think there was a second shooter, but that opens the door to who was the second shooter and why were they shooting, basically.
Okay.
Which is a very slippery slope to look into. So I looked into, as you do, being a conspiracy theorist, I had to do my research. So I looked into
YouTube.
I know, YouTube. Who would want Kennedy dead, for one? And it turns out there's argument for a few people that could have wanted him dead. The first being the mafia. So there's allegations, I don't know how provable or bullshit they are, that the mob helped Kennedy's parents, particularly his father, get JFK into office. There was a lot of mob backing. I don't know how they would help with that, being that they're an organised crime gang.
Small influence given compared to probably Kennedy's influence.
Yeah, but there was a lot of suggestion that they were involved with getting him into office. Now, when he was in office, him and particularly I think his brother they cracked down on the mob very hard in terms of trying to disrupt their criminal empire, basically, which was seen as a bit of a slight, seeing as, in theory, if they helped get him there, he then bit the hand that fed him. So there was that argument that it was a revenge hit. There is also an argument that the mafia had ties with Cuban nationals due to their casinos in Havana.
Right.
And they took issue to Kennedy's foreign policy. They blamed him for, I think it was the failed invasion of the Bay of Pigs. And so it was a retaliation hit for that. Either one of those can hold water. I have no idea.
I'm going to post something to you here now. So Lee Harvey Oswald was shot by
Jack Ruby.
Jack Ruby, who big mob guy. Okay, so you ask. Let's throw a theory in there. Why would the mob kill Lee Harvey Oswald?
Well, this is the thing. So, my understanding, I don't know how the timeline on this one is one that is you didn't look into as much, but Jack Ruby was dying of cancer and died
Didn't
before
know
he
this.
could. Yeah, so he died himself. He basically appealed the murder. He denied that he remembered doing it. He said he was just distraught. He was a mob guy.
Yeah.
Really ties to the mob. So it could be that Lee Harvey Oswald was the patsy to take the fall. Maybe he may not have shot anyone, and the mob could have been setting him up as the fall guy, and then just shot him because of what he knows, knowing that Jack Ruby would never roll over and rat on them because he was dying anyway.
And he's a mob guy.
He's a mob, yeah. He's Johnny Tight-Lips. He ain't gonna say nothing. So there was the mafia angle. There's also there's a lot of talk about the CIA being behind the hit. Now, what possible motivation could the CIA have for wanting Kennedy dead? Multiple, apparently. Although their direct involvement there's no provable evidence of their direct involvement, but it was said, and I have to consult my notes here so I don't fuck this up. So basically, Kennedy's stance was to initiate some cordial relations with Cuba, which the CIA didn't want. He was also seeking nuclear disarmament and to withdraw from Vietnam, which they didn't want. So their motivation to kill him was to prevent all of those things. Now, obviously, US ended up coming out of Vietnam anyway. So whether it was deemed successful or not, who knows? They didn't obviously disarm nuclear weapons, so potentially. So that was the theory behind the CIA doing it. And there is a link between Lee Harvey Oswald and the MK Ultra project to whether they were training mind-controlled hitmen to do this. And then you can argue that Lee Harvey Oswald could say, oh, I didn't do it because he had literally no recollection of doing it, because he was an activated sleeper agent. Having looked into MK Ultra, not as deeply as I should, but having looked into it, it turns out that those experiments were not very successful. And what they found during MK Ultra, apart from just randomly drugging each other all the time, like they were
LSD for everyone.
Yeah, they were just spiking people. What they tended to find out that they couldn't really brainwash someone to do something against their will. What they found was that in order to get someone to do something, you either hit them or you bribe them, effectively, or you threaten violence to them. So if I wanted Tom to do something, I would either bribe him with something, or I would violently attack him until he agreed to do it in order to stop me doing it. Or there is the I think it's called a tiger kidnapping, where you kidnap someone of the family.
Yeah. And
this is like a big thing in IRA to bribe someone, to get someone to do something for you. Those were the successful ways to get someone to do something. I think all the mind control stuff that they tried to do basically didn't work. It was just like a massive invasion of freedom, because they were just forcibly injecting people with, they were forcibly acid spiking them.
Yeah.
Poe, stop barking. I think Poe disagrees with our take on this. There was various other possible shooters that were put forward. So there's a lot of documents that suggest that it was the vice president who did it.
There's talked about
that. Yeah. But those two were the ones that I thought, those seem like quite credible reasons for someone to want to take out a president.
So the thing I think is interesting is to look at the CIA and FBI's involvement.
Yeah.
Because obviously they released some of the documents after it happened, and J. Edgar Hoover made a comment along the lines of, when Lee Harvey Oswald was in custody before the investigation had begun, said a statement that to ensure that he is found guilty.
Yeah.
So there was it was assuming the outcome of the investigation before the investigation started. And then there was another one from the CIA, I can't remember, it's flipped to my mind. But there's a few of these things where I'm like, there was a clear involvement. And then when we look at, I think it's more than the mob, because of the situation which will go into the autopsy, the exchanging of caskets, the brain matter being removed. The mob don't have that sort of influence.
This is true.
So the government had to have been involved to some degree if we're going that far down that rabbit hole.
Natalie, what have I walked into here? You've walked into us debating two of the biggest conspiracy theories on the planet.
Yeah.
So welcome aboard. And yeah, you're right on that front, in that a lot of the cover-up afterwards, you would have to assume was done by people that had access to the body.
Yeah.
And The magic bullet theory was an interesting one. So the theory that the bullet behind couldn't have followed the path that it followed. The debate behind that is the seating arrangement. So if Kennedy was directly behind the driver, there's no chance that bullet could have done the way it done. If he was seated slightly to this side, then the bullet would have hit that angle. Looking at the shape of the car and all.
Yes, this is JFK.
Yes, it is. It is JFK. And you get the theory. You get the feeling that. Would you shush? Obviously, Poe is very vocal about this conspiracy. That they didn't. They apparently they actively blocked a lot of. A lot of people looking into it. I don't think Poe likes my hat.
No, I don't think so. I bet the light's reflecting off it.
Come on, Popo, you can come join us. Come on. You can't just sit there and shout. That they tried to actively block the investigation into it, or at least they weren't very forthcoming with the evidence. I'm going to get Poe and bring him over here.
Yeah.
Come on.
So to add to this, the casket situation is an interesting one. So after JFK was shot, he didn't die straight away and they took him to the hospital. When he was in the hospital, he was given a tracheostomy. When they gave him the tracheostomy, they noted that there's obviously a hole in his trachea because they were starting to get the blood bubbling out of the exit wound of his head. Then they tried to administer intravenous blood transfusions, and then Kennedy died. Then Kennedy was loaded into a bronze casket. That's what they would do to load the president in. And then he arrived at the autopsy centre. That gold casket arrived at 6:30, but Jackie Kennedy arrived with like a military casket. No, Jackie arrived, with the bronze casket, but then 40 minutes prior to that, he actually arrived in like a military casket.
All right.
And so what happened then is when the body was given to him, the person who did the autopsy assessed the wounds, and then some of those records were deleted, and the second person who did the autopsy said that the brain was entirely replaced with another brain. So I don't know what that's all about, but there were definitely two caskets going in, and one of them, the casket that Jackie was with, wasn't the casket that JFK was with, because they saw it before she arrived at 6:30 and she didn't arrive till 7:30. So there's something amiss there, and I think they were probably tampering with exit wounds. They'll chop the brain out of someone else and put it in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's everything I've watched on it from people that seem relatively credible. They have no idea. They're very certain there was at least two shooters. They have no idea who the second shooter was. There's no they don't seem to debate that Lee Harvey Oswald was there and probably was there to try and shoot Kennedy. But then, here I go. This is my side of it. Lee Harvey Oswald was an ex-US Marine, like we knew. Yeah.
And he was a big advocate of communism. And so he was under close investigation from the CIA and the FBI, because Kennedy was shot on November 22nd, 1963, and then in 1959, Oswald had gone to Mexico City and met with the Russians several times, and at that point he was being monitored closely, like wiretaps, phones, everything else. So it begs the question, for a man who was being monitored so closely or listening to all of his phone calls, if it was such a concern about him wanting to assassinate the president, why didn't they know where he was on the day of the assassination and the fact he had a firearm in his hands, which makes me think he may have been there and present. You can't say, but if he was there, to say they'd monitored him so well, I think the point when you're like, I don't think he likes the president and his president's stance on communism, and he's now living in the same town as the president's motorcade, you think maybe
you keep an eye on him. He would be on the watch list for sure. So if you were going to plan an assassination, whether you're the CIA or the mob, or the possible theory of both working in conjunction for their mutual benefit of killing JFK, so the mob and the CIA or FBI, you have the perfect fall guy. You have someone that is known to be communist affiliated, or at least hold very strong communist views, and who would probably want to kill Kennedy. So you could make the argument that they had the perfect fall guy in the situation at the time for them to do the assassination and then stitch him up effectively.
I think if you were to put you just want to be friends, don't you, Bo? If I were to put my money on it and I said that who did it, who's involved, it had to be the government, because the level of sort of cover up and support. Please don't sniff my crotch. The level of cover up and support that they got and moving things around couldn't have come from anyone but the government.
Well, this is the thing. A lot of the documents that have been released have been redacted or not fully released. And the thing that gets to me is that Trump had said that in 2018 these documents will be made officially open that anyone can get to. And he released some, but not some. Some have been kicked down the road, apparently, to Biden, who then used the pandemic as a reason to further delay releasing them. They are, apparently, due to be released in their unredacted, completely open form this month.
Well, they were meant... Oh, I can't wait for that. But they were meant to be released when they first petitioned for it, because the film that Oliver Stone did about JFK actually led to a policy change that the rule was that they were going to release all of the documents over the next 25 years, with it ending, or final pieces being released in 2017. But like you say, it keeps getting kicked down the road, doesn't it?
So that would make me feel like perhaps there is some government involvement that they don't want the public to know about. Now, there is an argument, and I've seen this, and I can't find who it was, but there is an argument that when the Secret Service heard the first shot, so someone behind Kennedy basically ran to the car, tried to pull his weapon to protect Kennedy, and ended up shooting Kennedy himself, either by accident or
Don't
not.
step on my willy. Come on. Oh, there you go.
And that was supposedly why they wanted to cover it up, because it was an accidental shooting by the agent who was there to protect Kennedy, pulling his gun and accidentally shooting Kennedy.
Right.
And they wanted to cover up the fact that they had basically killed Kennedy, not like a plan, but just a complete actual fuck up.
Oh no, I'm not buying that.
Yeah,
I'm not buying that.
I'm not on board with that one, and that one's been like kind of floated and dismissed since it happened. But I'm more on the deliberate conspiracy side of things.
I think so. I think I can't draw as to the reason as to why it's not presenting as it is, but I definitely don't think the narrative that we're presented with is an accurate representation of the events that took place, and that's all I will peg my tinfoil hat on.
Yeah, I think if we're going to get my final thought on the JFK, I believe that there were definitely at least two shooters, just based on what my eyes see when he gets hit. Again, I'm not a ballistics expert, but it fairly clearly looks like he was hit from the front. And the fact that they deny this and say that all bullets came from behind, it just doesn't look correct to me. And again, I may be completely wrong here. You could have someone that is an expert in ballistics and movement of people that have been shot, and they'll say, no, that's consistent with what would have happened. It doesn't look like it, in my opinion. But again, I'm not an expert. So if I had to bet, I would say there was definitely more than one shooter. If you push me to say who the second shooter was, again, I would lean into the fact that it probably was government, based on the amount of, like you say, access they would have had to try and keep what they have kept suppressed.
Because I mean, if the mob shot him, let's say the mob shot him, why would they be so secretive about hiding all the documents?
Yeah, that's the thing.
That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Because like you'd think that they use that as a way to crack down on the mob anyway. You know, they'd be like, oh look, the mob have killed the president. We can crack down on the mob.
Yeah.
So yeah, my take would be that.
Inside job, agreed.
Yeah. So
confirm my biases. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've earned these today. Now this one, 9/11. So we'll move on to 9/11. I was really into 9/11 as an inside job when it first happened.
So I'm going to add this before we start. I knew Costas said this to me, and I've deliberately done zero research on it, because I might poke at some of these things to see where we stand on it.
So my view now is I'm a little bit more unsure. So there are certain things. How are we doing? There are certain things that just don't look consistent. So if we look at the official story for 9/11, is that Taliban, or Al Qaeda specifically, took 4 planes, crashed 2 of them into the Twin Towers, 1 of them into the Pentagon, and 1 of them was crashed by the passengers trying to fight off the attackers, and they took it down into a random field. After that happened, within a month, the US had invaded Afghanistan, and this was basically the official standpoint was to, obviously Afghanistan are harbouring terrorists that have committed this atrocity on American soil, so we have to go in and stop this. The conspiracies behind this are widespread. So there are multiple, as in who done it, inside job this, and so we're going into the potential anomalies with the story and what can make it a conspiracy.
So let's say this, okay? Because I'm curious about this. We'll do follow the epistemological path of things. There's a statement, 9/11 events didn't. I don't know how can I put it. 9/11 events, as they appear, don't reflect the reality of what happened. How confident are you that that's true out of us in terms of a percentage?
Well, so this is the thing. If you'd asked me when it originally happened, it was 100%. I thought this was it. So basically there was 2 trains of thought. There was the train of thought that they knew it was going to happen and didn't stop it.
Yeah.
And there was a train of thought that they deliberately caused it.
Okay. So let's go. I would obviously deliberately caused it. I don't think I'm in that camp. Hidden some things, or could have done some things about it potentially. And the only reason, like I said, I've done no research, but I read a really interesting book called The House of Bush and the Saudis.
Yeah.
And so that might trigger some of my things on that, but I'll bring that into it. Where are you?
So originally I kind of batted between the two. So what they've said, so on the standpoint of they knew it was happening but they didn't stop it. What they thought was...
I'm loving the comments, by the way.
I know, these are good. Keep these coming. You knew it was going to happen, but prepare for it. So basically, I can still get on board with the fact that they potentially knew there was going to be a terror attack involving planes crashed into buildings because they think they simulated this. When these planes were taken, whether this was through planning by the terrorists or negligence by the Americans or both, it happened during a day where there weren't many, they didn't have any jets to scramble to intercept these planes being taken.
Right.
The terrorists, when they took over these planes, turned off the tracking or whatever it was. So if you're an air traffic controller, you're looking at 4,500 blobs. It would fly under the radar until it's very far off course. And by the time they realise this plane is not where it should be, they've got no one in the vicinity to come and shoot it down.
Right.
Now, would they have shot it down if they'd known what was going to happen? You could argue that they probably wouldn't have done anyway because it was over a city, and if you shoot down a plane over a city, they're going to be casualties regardless if it hits the Twin Towers or not.
Yeah.
And if they shoot it down, you can actively say America caused this by shooting down the plane over its own citizens.
Yeah.
So what the argument was, Pentagon. So I'll go into the Pentagon one. That's quite an interesting one. What they thought, the plane that actually got taken down by the passengers that fought back.
Yeah.
There was a lot of talk that plane was shot down because it was going for the White House.
Right. Okay.
But that came out of a partial truth. So what was told was planes were ordered out by Cheney to go and shoot, to go and take that plane down, specifically take it down rather than shoot it down. They were going to ram it down.
Right. Okay.
So the planes that they scrambled to send out weren't armed. They didn't have anything to shoot it down with.
Right. Okay.
But by the time they got there, it was too late. The passengers had kind of fought back and taken the plane down anyway. The Pentagon one. So the Pentagon, the debris didn't look like a plane, right? In that it was a hole 75 foot wide.
Right.
Planes are much wider than that. And they think, well, where the impact of the wings? And supposedly, the story goes, so the conspiracy side of it is that it was a missile that hit the Pentagon.
Right.
It's consistent with the shape of the hole. And what they think happened was that the plane, as it came in, one of the wings broke off from the ground and the other one broke off on impact. So the crash was basically what hit the Pentagon was supposedly the fuselage of the plane rather than the wings. And again, I've seen pictures after the Pentagon impact, and there doesn't look to be much debris from a plane around there.
Okay.
So, but you got to take into account, when was that picture taken? Was it taken immediately?
I think if I was to like trying to make sure the information I've got is good enough, from what you said, it's hard for me to say yes plane, yes bomb.
Yeah. So it's like, if you look at the shape of the thing, it doesn't look like a plane had hit it unless there was no wings on the plane. But there's supposedly debris from the plane where the wing had broken off, and I couldn't say either one way or the other whether it was a plane or a missile that hit the Pentagon. Well, no, 4 planes went missing, and 2 of them went into the Twin Towers. 1 crashed into a field. So if the thing that hit the Pentagon wasn't a plane, then where the hell did that 4th plane go? Would be the argument.
Yeah.
But either way, something crashed into the Pentagon. Now, the conspiracies behind it. So, the conspiracy behind it were that they blocked the live.
I'm not sure what you're saying, Indy.
The potential conspiracies. So basically, again, I've made a list of this.
Yeah, love it.
And I've also made a list of the inconsistency. So whether or not it was a planned inside job or people kind of knew it was going to happen, 2 different things. One of them seems more viable than the other. So, firstly, the interesting thing: Building 7 of the World Trade in the World Trade Complex. This building collapsed without being impacted by anything. So you had planes that hit the Twin Towers. The theory behind it was that when the planes hit there, the jet fuel heated up to a degree where the steel destabilized in the buildings and they fell. People said that the falling of the buildings was consistent with controlled demolition because they fell straight down. People that designed the building said it was designed to fall straight down so that if something happened to the building, it wouldn't fall over and like kill everyone in the vicinity. Which makes sense, but again, I didn't design the building, so I have literally no idea. You could find an expert that would tell me that was true and one that would tell me that was untrue, and I would not know the difference. Now, what people have said is that jet fuel doesn't burn hot enough to melt steel, which is true. It doesn't.
It is true, yeah.
But steel is notoriously like bendy, especially under heat. That's how you form steel under heat, and that happens at about 600 degrees. Whereas jet fuel burns at about 1500, so it heats up enough
to make it bendy.
Enough to make it bendy. And when you've got enough, if you take impact from a plane, which is going to cause some structural damage, and then you add steel girders that are now like flimsy from the heat, I can see how it would fall. No, I'm still seeing it.
Jet fuel. She said jet fuel theory is garbage.
See, I could see how it would destabilize the building, but on the flip side of that, right? So just come back.
I think Indy was saying that the stream wasn't working.
Oh, okay. Sweet. Hopefully we're back for you guys now.
Yeah.
So if we look on the other side, saying it was controlled demolition, so they planted bombs in there.
Yeah.
We have to think, well, when the hell did they manage to plant all those bombs along the girders of the buildings without anyone noticing?
Right.
Like, it's a lot of explosives that you'd have to put in there. So while I'm not saying it's impossible, I'm saying I don't think that they'd planted a shitload of C4 in the buildings to detonate. Although when you look at it, right, when you watch the buildings coming down, you can see things like going out the side of the building below the where it's falling, right? Now you could say that's the steel girders being pressurized and pinging out the side, or you could say it's explosions from within where they're hitting the buttons and blowing everything up. Again, I'm not a demolitions expert. I could look at that and see both. I could say, that makes sense. And both do make sense. What doesn't make sense to me was Building 7 falling down, right? So, Building 7 wasn't hit by anything apart from some debris from the other buildings.
Okay.
That building went down, right? The thing that's unusual about that, well, I say unusual, there's probably multiple things unusual about it, but the BBC reported that it collapsed. Now, this is a fact. This is the really weird thing. I thought I was in on this conspiracy. I thought it was an inside job. But when I heard this, at the time even, I thought, well, that's bullshit. That they're not stupid enough to do that. BBC said, Building 7 has gone down. They said this at 4:54. Building 7 did not fall down until 5:20. And this is at the same time. This isn't like a mix-up of times. They said it had fallen down before it fell down.
I want to pick at that. Were they aware of any impact to it at that point? Had anything come close to it? Because you could, from the other side of it, you could say, oh, Building 7 might have got hit at 4:54, but it didn't collapse until 5:20, right? It might have been impacted and eventually it collapsed. When was Building 7 impacted in any degree?
So, in theory, Building 7 was hit by some debris that caused fires from the initial impact to the Twin Towers itself. CNN, this is a story from BBC. BBC said that CNN had reported as early as 4:15 that Building 7 was on fire and in danger of collapsing. And it looks like there was some confusion there. This is what the BBC had said. Like, CNN had said, oh, this building is in danger of collapsing. And the BBC ran with that and said, oh, it's collapsed, even though it hadn't collapsed. Now, I'm a bit cynical as to how you would get things that wrong.
I agree.
As a journalist. It could be just they hired the world's most stupid journalist for that day.
Or they just got caught up in the moment trying to report things super quick. I don't know. I'm playing advocate here.
Or they had a clairvoyant who knew that Building 7 was going to fall down before it did. Which is,
possibly.
It is possible.
Never say never.
Now, the cynic in me would say that 2 months, roughly, before these buildings were hit, an insurance policy was taken out on them. The insurance payout for these policies was enormous, and it specifically, it didn't exclude acts of terrorism. Now, but that's a bit of a red herring, because at that point in time, acts of terrorism weren't standardly excluded from insurance policies because it wasn't thought of as an actual risk. Like, who the fuck is going to fly a plane?
Yeah.
So after 9/11, insurance policies were changed to specifically exclude things like that. But looking at it through that lens, in hindsight, you're like, oh look, you took out an insurance policy that specifically didn't prevent that from happening, and cashed in a massive amount. And apparently, because both buildings were hit separately in separate incidents, got 2 payouts for it.
Right. Okay.
So it's not one act; it's 2 acts.
Right. Okay.
So you could argue that, seeing as those 2 buildings and the other one that wasn't hit, that wasn't the closest building to those 2. There were other buildings in between, but those were the 3 buildings that went down, and all 3 of those were insured by the same person who got a massive payout.
Right.
You could see how it seems a bit suspicious that of all the buildings to fall down, they all happen to be covered by this insurance policy, and no other buildings that weren't hit. Yeah. So people got that and ran with it, and I, like I say, when I found out that they actually had reported it as falling down earlier, I thought, well, that's very, I thought that was a bullshit thing until I reconfirmed it that actually it still was a legitimate thing. So you could argue that these insiders had knowledge that this would happen, took out an insurance policy that would make them very rich if it happened, and allowed it to happen and become very rich. There was also unusual trading on the 2 airlines that got hijacked. So the 2 airlines that got hijacked, so American Airlines and United Airlines. Mm-hmm. They were the airlines that the 2 planes were taken from. There was a lot of unusual trading in the few days leading up to this, only for those 2 airlines, that basically meant that should the stocks on those 2 airlines tank, people would make a lot of money. And wouldn't you know it, after they crash into iconic buildings in America and bring them down, their stock tanked. So a lot of people made a lot of money, which seems unusual. But again...
Yeah, and this is the thing. I'm going to add some of my things into it. George Bush, obviously his dad, and the whole issue with the war in Iraq, and all the other stuff going on in Afghanistan. They had a really strong relationship with the Saudis, and particularly what the Americans are known to with the Saudis, their relationship to oil and the oil industry. But George Bush was also known as, George Bush Jr. was known as, historically, when you read this book, as the Burning Bush, because there was so much nepotism going on, but with the favour with these Saudi rich families, he'd go into businesses and essentially tank the businesses.
Yeah.
But they were giving him all this reputation so he could eventually step into the presidency. How many planes flew out on September 11 after it went off? 0. Everything was grounded. Except one plane full of Saudis that went back to Saudi Arabia. So there's part of me that's like, I think My view would be, from the stuff I've read with the Saudis particularly, and the motivation behind oil is, I wouldn't say direct plan, and this is all very interesting, I'm not quite there yet, direct plan, but blind eyes were turned to try and facilitate this invasion.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. So, when it came to the plane being flown out of like members of Osama bin Laden's direct family, because I think they established fairly quickly, or at least they pointed to Osama bin Laden almost instantly as being the culprit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I'd have to go back and look at the events, but I think he probably claimed it as well. Every time there was an attack, and
it was within days though, Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda had claimed that.
And this is quite consistent with like ISIS now. Whenever there's an attack, whether it's ISIS or not, they'll claim the attack. So to fly out now, again, I'm not a government agent. I'm not investigating war crimes or anything like that. But I would assume that if I knew that Osama bin Laden had committed an act of terror in the country that I was supposed to be governing and looking after, flying out to Saudi, his immediate relatives or acquaintances would probably not be a good idea, because if anyone is going to have leads on where he could be, you would assume that family harbouring him would probably be a line of questioning that you'd want to follow.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, again, I'm basing this all off of watching 24, for example. But if someone does a crime, the immediate family and friends are probably a good place to start in terms of locating them or trying to figure out why they've done, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to fly them out seems a bit unusual in terms of how you would do, I suppose, investigative police work. But again, I'm not a police officer or an FBI agent or anything like that. So perhaps getting rid of what could be potentially your biggest leads is a smart thing to do. I can't see it myself. But like you say, the conspiracy behind it was they either allowed this to happen or caused it to happen with the idea to invade Afghanistan to basically for resources, to take oil, to put a gas line in, and the second I suppose motivation to do it was to do what they tend to do, was basically overthrow the government and install a puppet government that was more sympathetic towards like American.
Which is weird because the US have never done that.
No. I mean, that seems completely off brand for them. Yeah. You know, it's like, so it like, do I feel that America organised 9/11 specifically for those ends? I don't think so, and I don't think so. Not because I don't think it's beyond what America could or would do, but I think that Bush, he came across as an incredibly stupid person, like incredibly stupid. He just seemed very dull, dim-witted. He didn't seem like an intelligent guy. And for him to, assuming that he was directly in charge of this, he might not have been, but let's say that he was.
Yeah.
I don't think he could pull off something like this and keep it under wraps, like properly under wraps, to the point where, unless he's double bluffing and he's actually a genius.
I would challenge that by saying that if it was a government inspired thing, let's look at the last two presidents the US has had, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who are historically intellectually challenged.
Yes.
Yeah, the government can function fairly well without them. And I think with the influence of lobbyists and the influence of people who help those people get into power, I don't think like the presidents have a lot to do with what's going on in the government, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I doubt the level of like power involvement they have myself, in fairness. My take on these things, rather than like a deliberate setup, is more like an opportunistic response. And I tend to think this with a lot of conspiracies nowadays. So, like, if it turned out that America had organised this, like deliberately provoked it, or turned a blind eye, I wouldn't be like massively surprised. But what I do think was that this situation happened, so Twin Towers got bombed, and then the instant kind of response from America was, okay, how can we use what's happened here to get what we want, which is basically to take resources from Afghanistan, be it oil and gas, and install a puppet government. And I think basically they had all that they needed based on what happened. So I think what happened in their eyes was potentially fortunate because it gave them the green light to do what they probably wanted to do anyway.
But it's also the power of like public approval.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, you take, going back onto something slightly unrelated, but when Vladimir Putin was in power, and still is, when the athletes did incredibly well in Sochi at the Olympic Games, his approval rating went up 79%.
Yeah.
And so, of course, he'll issue policies that would be a little bit like, should I?
Yeah, yeah.
And I can see that with, it's like the whole war on terror, the very like cliched American, like, we're going to go fight, we're going to get our boys back, we're going to get revenge. And I think it was a nice way to fuel that American patriotism, which sign your boys up for the military, we'll send them over and get them back.
Well, there was the thing with the war on terror is that it spilled over from Afghanistan to Iraq on the most like flimsy basis.
Yeah, 100%.
It was like, oh, there's weapons that they never found, but they thought that Saddam was basically like just jerking them off and like
let's get another person in power.
Yeah, pretty much like that. That spillover seemed like completely opportunistic. Like they just pushed it. I don't think Iraq was involved with 9/11 in any way, shape, or form. But I think that it's a very resource-rich place that they figured, well, we've like, to take a relatively like simplistic Midwestern American view, like, oh, they're all in roughly the same area. Let's just you know. But when you rile up Americans to get that level of patriotism, you tend to get that whole, everyone gets lumped into us and them, and anyone who's not like a white middle class American is basically a them.
I'll tell you a funny story. My wife works for an American company, so when the war in Ukraine just kicked off, she has these meetings with like probably 70% Americans over in Arizona and Los Angeles, and one of the managers said, you know what, he said, it's when the war kicked off, it just is like, it kind of hits different when it's people like you. And Jillian's like, what does he mean? Does he mean just like white people? And yeah, that's exactly what it means. Like, they're people just like us now.
Yeah,
so we can relate to them. It's wild.
Osama bin Laden was murdered by
Omar Sheikh.
Well, he's probably not shown. Oh yeah, so Osama bin Laden's body being like lobbed into the sea almost immediately was a bit of a weird one.
Yeah.
So bearing in mind what they did with Saddam's thing, they took pictures, they were fucking around with his body. You'd think that they wouldn't just bury Osama at sea. I like my opinion with Osama bin Laden was that he was killed pretty much instantly after it had happened. I don't know when he stopped appearing on films, but I reckon they probably got him
pretty quick.
But they needed a reason to stay in Afghanistan. Now, if he was pinpointed as the head honcho of like, oh, he's the one that masterminded this, and you kill him within like a month of 9/11,
it stops the campaign being dragged out.
Yeah,
right?
It's like, how can you justify being in Afghanistan for all those years? So if you had to like put a gun to my head,
tinfoil hat.
I've got a tinfoil hat. No, amazing. So yeah, Nat commenting that she has a tinfoil hat on. We definitely want a picture. I'll make a collage of anyone wearing a tinfoil hat. So anyone watching this, if you have a tinfoil hat like we have, get a picture of you wearing it and send it in. And I'm gonna, for the episode thumbnail, I'm gonna have like a collage of all of us with our tinfoil hats. But yeah, I believe that I don't think that he was killed by SEAL Team 6. I think he probably killed sometime before that.
Did you hear the thing that Graham Linehan said about it? Graham Linehan's the guy who wrote Father Ted and the IT Crowd. And someone started a rumour that when SEAL Team 6 kicked down the door and there's the TV on, that they were watching, I think it was either Father Ted or the IT Crowd. And they're like, oh yeah, it's dead funny. I'm like, so I don't know where that started from, but he got all this stick for it. Apparently Sam was watching a show.
That's amazing. That's quite funny. So, but again, for those of you that weren't here at the start, when 9/11 happened, I was massively on the insider job. It was off of a documentary maker called Michael Moore, who basically, he done Bowling for Columbine, which was a very good one. It was very anti-gun, but it was it was with reason. He followed like school shootings and very good documentary. And then he did Fahrenheit 9/11, which went into his reasoning behind like why he thinks the government was complicit with the 9/11 attacks. You were 12. So when this happened, I was in school. I think I was 15, 16.
I think I was just in year 7. I remember walking back from school. It was 2001, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I remember like the teachers coming. They sent us home for the day. It was a weird.
Yeah.
It's a weird time. You don't realise. It's 21. So it's funny when there are life events like that everyone remembers where you were when it happened. You know, like I remember I was in an English class and the head of year came in and he was like, "Oh, the Twin Towers has just been hit by planes." And first of all, you're thinking it's an accident. You know, what's happened? The plane crashed into the Twin Towers, and then all of a sudden it comes out that it's a deliberate terror attack. The other interesting thing with this is right now, you guys might be able to enlighten me on this, but unless you're, I suppose, a fighter pilot, probably not. There have been people that have said that the planes that were flown into the building had no passengers on them and were fly-by-wire planes. Now, obviously, that is like I don't believe that. It would be very disrespectful to all the people that died on those planes to say like, oh, they're crisis actors and whatnot. However, what they've said was that there have been fighter pilots that have said the maneuver that plane pulled when it banged into the building is a very advanced maneuver. Now, this was said by your typical Midwestern American pilot. He's oh, no Afghanistan
man would be able to do what we do.
He said like he couldn't do that, and he's like, I can't do that. This guy can't do it with his rudimentary pilot training, you know. So they believe that the planes were fly-by-wire. I think the planes were hijacked. They crashed into the building. I think that it was on a day that the air traffic control had been stepped down. I don't think that was deliberate. I think that was probably, you give that credit to the planners of the attack. Yeah. They done it on that day. Yeah. I don't think that the Americans would have shot down the plane if they had the chance because it was over a city. Whether or not they knew it was going to hit the Twin Towers, all the insider trading that made loads of people money, that's very... A lot of people saying, there was an investigation into it that said, this is... it's just coincidental. I thought, well, that coincidence made a lot of people millions and millions of dollars. But
I'll also say, and he said, they trained in America to be pilots.
Yeah.
I want to say about the advanced move, when he said it's an advanced move, what makes flying really tricky is I could probably do the loop, but I wouldn't survive.
Yeah, that's the thing.
So you can do an advanced manoeuvre because ultimately you're crashing the plane, which they did.
Yeah. So basically, the guy saying like, "Oh, he couldn't do that advanced manoeuvre." Basically, all he's saying is that he did a really good job of crashing the plane.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
And like I say, there were people that saying it was. I've seen people saying it was missiles that hit the plane, and obviously there is footage of planes going into the building. So you can see how some conspiracies behind that are just like kind of nonsense. And they're saying like, oh no, it was a missile. It's like, well, I have eyes. It's clearly a plane,
Yeah.
I think things that don't add up are... So what they said was debris and fire from the Twin Towers got to Building 7, set fire to like 10 floors on that, and they couldn't put it out. And they might have known the building was going to fall down. It just seems a bit unusual that the building collapsed without an impact. But again, I
think from an outsider's view, who's probably not done as much research on this, the plane's definitely hit.
Yep.
The Pentagon's proper questionable.
Yeah.
When the Building 7's proper questionable. But I think what we're seeing with some of the theories that we do is like an event happens and that event facilitates massive political change in some form. So it's like it starts and they're like, let's kick everything off downhill, so make it a bigger event so we can do more stuff.
Yeah. I think literally, like I say, this event happened and then opportunistic government literally took it and ran with it to make as many changes as they could to as many things as they could. Basically, like hoarding loads of resources. And realistically, most wars are fought over resources. So you could argue that the whole thing in Ukraine is because like the Donbass region is a very resource-rich area that Russia wants because it's very fertile and has a lot of like food. And basically, if you have X amount of people on the planet, you have X amount of resources on the planet to feed those people. We don't have an abundance more of land that we can farm on that's fertile. The population is increasing. It's going to be difficult to feed those people.
Yeah.
So resources get more expensive or more scarce, and people fight over resources. And people hoard resources, and I think most wars are generally over resources and money. So you can see how they would use this attack on America, on very symbolic buildings in America, as an opportunity to go and grab as much resources as they could.
Maybe. Yeah.
And basically, like, as they just remove a government that wasn't very sympathetic towards America and install someone that perhaps was. Although you could argue that it was a complete failure in that as soon as they withdrew, I think the Taliban have like taken back most of the territory pretty much instantly. It's gone pretty bad. So yeah, like over the years, I think my view on it all has changed to being, oh, it was deliberate. It was they caused this deliberately. You know, I don't think it was an inside job particularly. I think that they may have had advance warning that it was going to be a terror attack, although whether they knew it was going to be the Twin Towers and a plane, you know, I don't know.
I think it is the thing with conspiracy theories, as we kind of bring this together, is it is that slippery slope. People make an assumption. If they don't have an answer, they'll fill that answer in with their own theory. Yeah. And I think we've got to be really, really careful of that, because I think with the JFK thing, I can confidently say that there were two shooters, at least.
Yeah.
And there's some questionable things about how his body was disposed of, and also like the autopsy. 9/11, planes definitely hit the building, but there's also some other stuff that go on. But I can't fill in those blanks. I can't be there. And then this has happened, and then this has led to a financial crash, and I don't have enough information to fill that in.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I think that when we were talking at the beginning of this about how conspiracy theories back then were very nuanced and very like interesting and deep, and nowadays they're just a bit fucking shit compared to, you know, like conspiracy theorists out there nowadays. Pull up your fucking socks.
Yeah, try harder.
You're making the most fucking boring, shit, bland, unbelievable conspiracy theories, and then you're trying to link every one of these shit theories to another shit theory, so that it's all part of one even bigger shit theory.
What I would say is, as well, with a lot of the big shit conspiracy theories, you're telling me that there's cross-collaboration between Russia, America, Eastern countries, and they're all just like, yeah, let's not tell everyone about this.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and never. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm like, there's someone who used to be in a cult. I'm like, I know about cults, and when we talk about, we're going to have this secret meeting and it transcends all of our government policies. No, stop it.
Yeah. Like, I can't remember which comedian said it, but it was brilliant. He's talking about, like, Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. That's a secret between two people that got out to the world. You can't keep that secret.
Yeah.
Then, like, how the hell are you going to keep a big intergovernmental, inter-country conspiracy under wraps?
Also, just while we have a microphone, I've always wanted to do this with a microphone. Epstein didn't kill himself.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to have to go into that at some point as well. So obviously, today we wanted to go into those two conspiracies, particularly because they're interesting ones, and there's a lot within there that you can unpack. There are a lot of other conspiracy people want us to look into that we probably touch on in another episode. So people wanted to talk about COVID and how that has been linked to literally everything from tracking to depopulation to somehow global warming now. That's all part of my rant about how every shit conspiracy is now linked to another shit conspiracy.
Yeah.
All of the conspiracies now seem to be linked to the people on the left being paedophiles. That seems to be like the ultimate kind of thing for it.
I think there was one thing that when we put the question out about conspiracy theories, someone said, like, why is there an agenda to silence people who who challenge the narrative? And I don't necessarily think that there's an agenda to silence people who fight the narrative, but also from both sides of the fence, people should absolutely be able to be called out and have their bullshit called out.
100%.
And it's this persecution syndrome again, where they're like, well, they've blocked me because I've expressed this view. I'm like, maybe. Like, there are certain things that people have blocked and shut down on, but I'm like, I think we live in a world where if we do have these views, we can actually express them at present. It's just, if you say stuff about, like, things on Facebook that can be considered a little bit, then they might block you on that platform, but you're allowed to go speak to someone else about that in private.
But I believe, my own personal thing, I'm not big on censorship.
No, I'm not.
Most people don't call the shots. Yeah, but I reckon that's actually very true, indeed, to be fair. The government don't call the shots themselves. Or at least not in isolation. I think there's a lot lobbyists and money that influence the decisions they make. What I believe is that everyone should have a right to an opinion.
Yes.
However, if the opinion is a shit or stupid one,
Yes.
then you should be able to shut that opinion up, so you don't have to listen to it because it's fucking stupid. So like, if you bring a good conspiracy theory, you should not be silenced. You should basically be able to present that so that people can look into it. If your conspiracy theory is fucking stupid, it doesn't make any sense, then yeah, it probably should be silenced because it's just wasting my time to read it. And people are generally more stupid for having read it. Like, doesn't further society in any way. If anything, it takes the gullible and stupid and makes them more gullible and stupid.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. It's like you're dealing in absolutes, aren't you? And I think instead of us talking about, everyone's being centered, I'm like, why don't we take everyone and just push their skills to be able to accurately discern what information is good? Like what we talked about today is there's some things that I'm pretty confident saying, but then I'm not going to be like, right, it's definitely aliens.
Yeah. But like, if we were to apply the thing that now that all these things are linked, if we were to apply this, right, then somehow the conspiracy or basically the fact that Kennedy was probably shot by more than one person is linked to 9/11 somehow, ultimately for the same reason, which is beyond me to connect the dots.
But then let's talk about, then it was on 2001 and 2001 plus 19, because 19 is a really important number. It adds up to 2020.
Yeah, didn't make sense.
The minute COVID.
Yeah,
that's where it started.
That's how it all happened.
And then paedophile rings.
Yeah, and vampires.
Intergalactic vampires.
Oh yeah, we've got a lot more to go into on those. So yeah, like for those of you that are watching this live, obviously get a picture of you in a tinfoil hat. I look forward to seeing your efforts. Obviously, thanks for jumping in and throwing your comments in on there. I've been trying to read them as we go, but it's a bit far away. So,
got to some.
But like I say, so if I was going to put a final nail in the coffin, or basically just my final say on it, my take: JFK shot by more than one person. I don't think that falls fully on Lee Harvey Oswald. Whether he was there or not, took a shot at Kennedy or not, I can't say confidently or not, one way or the other. Like, it would make sense for him to be there and potentially shoot. I don't think he did that as part of the MK Ultra project to become a super spy, because that project was a colossal failure in that it just made people go mad from acid trips and lots of suicide and all this kind of stuff. I think that the kind of the journey to make a super spy that was mind controlled did not work. Now, you could say that was double bluff, and in fact they presented it did work, and they didn't want people to find out about it, but that's a bit of a leap in my opinion. So I feel that he was there as the perfect fall guy. I do think that if you were to press me on whether it was the mob, the CIA, FBI, or a collaboration of all of them, it would make more sense that it was a government agency that wanted to kill him based on the fact that he was trying to strike up relations with Cuba and disarm the nuclear program and pull out Vietnam and various things that they didn't want to happen at the time. So they either colluded with a mob hitman and let it happen, or put their own gunman there, and just so happened to have the perfect patsy to pin it on, at the time, that would also stoke the anti-communist flames and keep those things going, things that they wanted to keep going. What would your final say on the Kennedy?
Kennedy is this: I'm certain that there was more than one shooter, and I think that the government were involved because the things with his casket and his autopsy couldn't have been orchestrated by anyone outside of the government. Why that was, I don't know, but I think the government were involved because I've seen some of the documentation from J. Edgar Hoover, who's made some strange comments. So I think the government were involved. I just don't know why.
Yeah. And when it comes to 9/11, again, I fully hold up my hands. I was fully into it being a government set up from the start. Now I tend to think that it was a case of the government being opportunistic and using a situation that happened to basically invade another country. I don't think they planned it. Whether they had advanced knowledge of it or not, I don't know. It would not surprise me, because unless their intelligence is amazing, the way they put together the suspect and were basically invading Afghanistan within a month of it happening, it would suggest they had very good intelligence on it, right? Yeah. But in order for them to have the attack happen in the first place, they would have had to have pretty bad intelligence to let it happen if they didn't want it to happen.
I'm just seeing Indies put Jill Dando.
That could be one to look into. So I tend to think that 9/11, they may have had advance warning that there was going to be a terror attack. Whether they knew the exact nature of it or not, I don't know. But it turned out to be an attack on an iconic landmark of American strength and trade that got attacked, and that fit in perfectly with them wanting to rally a lot of nationalism and pride to go and invade a country when they probably could have just killed Osama bin Laden and taken out Al-Qaeda fairly quickly.
Yeah.
I think that they used that as an opportunity to go basically pillage Afghanistan for as much as they could, and then use the remaining nationalism as an excuse to go and pillage Iraq, basically, which I don't believe had anything to do with the events at all. In my opinion, again, I don't have access to any of the intelligence, but it's just my take on it.
And to all of you who are listening, you don't have access to all the intelligence too.
Also a good point. So none of us know, but I do, like I say, I do believe that it was opportunism at its worst in order to basically make a lot of gains.
I think I reflect that, particularly with America's relationship with Saudi Arabia. I think probably opportunistic, maybe at worst turning a blind eye. Not sure.
Ooh, touche. So what we do, I'm going to stop the broadcast that's going up on YouTube now. So thanks for watching that, guys, and we'll catch you at the next one. Obviously, for those of you that are not watching this live on Insta now, if you do want to follow my Instagram, it's at b_strong_pt_ or at hippobjj, which is where I post most of my memes and all the funny shit that's not professional. Tom, if people want to find you,
you can go at Tom_Walker_physio.
And that's where we'll be. So I'm going to end that feed now. Thanks a lot, guys.